Okay, so welcome along to Pete Mortimer. Thanks,
Hello,
thanks for spending some time with us today, Pete.
a pleasure.
Oh, yes, it's always a pleasure. Uh,
Always.
always. And the main reason that we're having a little chat today is it's a very special week this week, particularly in Cardiff. I mean, it's special from the point of view of, unfortunately, we lost John Lennon 40 years ago. And there was a lot of tributes yesterday regarding that. We did a few on Cardiff Live as well. But one of the reasons that got me thinking about having a chat with you, Pete, was the Capitol Theatre had two momentous gigs, really, the end of this week, which is the 12th of December. And actually, there was one on the 11th as well, I think, because Led Zeppelin played two nights
For
and the
sure.
Beatles played the
Yeah,
one night. Now,
yeah.
I instantly thought of yourself because I know what big fan you are of Zeppelin and of the Beatles. And I've regularly seen your bands play where the Hindenburgs, where you're doing a lot of Led Zeppelin songs, mostly Led Zeppelin songs, I would say, and
Mm,
also your various bands that you've had playing Beatles covers. So for the
yeah.
perfect person to talk to about this and tell us a little bit about your experience really with those bands in terms of being a fan and playing is yourself. So, I mean, the first question, I was going to sort of start off with the Beatles, really. The first question I was going to ask you is kind of what is your earliest recollection of hearing a Beatles song or really getting into the Beatles at an early age?
Well, like you, Tone, we're old, so we're like we're
Thanks for
lucky
bringing
enough.
that up, yeah.
We're like lucky enough to remember them coming out live, as brand new actors. I know when I was a little boy, I was aware there were this band called the Beatles, and I didn't like the look of them. I thought they looked stupid. They had this like high collar, that's what you call it, Nehru or something collar
Yeah,
now. And they had
yeah,
those funny haircuts, and you could get chewing gum cards with them on.
that's right,
And it
yeah.
was all very black and white, obviously. And I remember probably hearing "Please Please Me," and I just didn't like it.
Mm,
I don't know why, but I just it didn't sit with me.
right.
And then another memory I've got, I'm in Barry Island Juniors, no, infant school, and I think I Want to Hold Your Hand or something like that is that, or from me to you or something. And jumping up and down on the like a little bench there, and we're all singing it. So it obviously something happened between the one and the other where they were suddenly very likable and very hip, and I don't know, for somebody of 5 or 6 or whatever the hell I want. But the biggie, the real biggie with me was we were taken to see Help in, I think it was Swansea Grand Theatre, because my grandparents are from there, and that was it. It was like, you know, guitars with knobs and switches on it, and that's what I wanted to do. I mean, I've always wanted to do, apart from a footballer when you were like a little kid, it
Yeah.
was playing guitars with knobs and switches on them.
Mm,
I had to have knobs and switches on. I didn't know what they actually did, but it looked cool. And in a band with other guys,
mm.
which probably being chased by girls, but I wasn't very interested in girls at that point. But it just
Yeah.
looked like an absolute scream, And I'm still trying to bloody do it now, obviously. And then you had the sort of monkeys come along that were like the next little made up Beatles, but it's that sort of vibe of being in a
Mm.
group and doing all those sort of songs. It still sticks with me. Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, and it's,
The,
it's like you touched on. There was a lot of merchandise stuff. I remember having
oh
like a plastic Beatles wig you could put on, and
yeah,
there was
friend
like
of mine had one.
everything. There was plates, there was
Yeah,
cards, there was everything. But it's interesting you mentioned about Help, because I think Paul McCartney came out this week and mentioned something about he didn't realize, but it was John Lennon it was actually him. The lyrics was talking about him, a cry for help. He
yeah,
didn't
not being able to
realize.
cope. Yeah,
Yeah, and I think a lot, people are a lot more about aware now about mental issues, and
yeah,
it's interesting to say, going back to the '60s, and of course things like that weren't really spoken about then, but of course Lennon
no,
was using the words of the song, so I think that's interesting. So, Help the movie was really what helped you into the Beatles, and then of course you were sold on it. Then you were like
yeah,
a big fan, yeah.
yeah. We had a dance set record player. My mum bought a dance set record player in olive green, and we had two records. We had Help and we had Sound of Music. So that was played to death for it. Not much else, but writing amazing songs between like Rogers and Hammersmith, as we call them, and Beatles. Yeah, just wow, just the whole thing of it. So my main, I mean, I love riffs and I love plays and that, but my main thing is still tunes and songs and all that sort of stuff. It's
Hmm.
absolutely mind blowing.
So, can you kind of remember? I mean, you started playing guitar young, yeah?
I was Yeah, my brother had a guitar,
Yeah.
which my mum bought for him, and I was banned. I was banned from playing.
Yeah, of course.
Don't you go in my room. So what you're going
Yeah.
to do is like, see, when he's out, you're going to go and pick it up and start playing it. So I started getting better on it than he was, and that pissed him right off, obviously. But
Mm.
and I think obviously there was no books or no tuition on pop or rock in those days, so you had to put records on with no knowledge of how to play and just try and move your fingers till it sounded a bit like it, which must have taken forever. But I suppose what it does do is give you an amazing ear,
Mm.
given time, But
Yeah, sure.
yeah, so I remember doing like things you realize later are just wrong, but it's your take on Cream or
Mm.
God, I couldn't do a lot of Beatles notes. I didn't know anything, but it was like anything simple, like Spoonful by Cream or something. You'd have a pop at it,
Yeah.
Um, and still am.
So do you remember that the first Beatles song that you learned to play on guitar?
Uh, no, I can't
That's a
possibly
great
remember.
answer. So
No,
so that
no.
leads on.
I
That
sort
lead,
of made. I made up for it later. I
yeah.
remember buying books with no knowledge of what one of those funny little dotty diagrams over the top, and that looked a bit like ooh, But it was
Yeah.
baffling, because it just had to. I think we had like a Burt Whedon book out in those days, didn't we? But you didn't want to play that stuff because it was very
Yeah.
square. I didn't even know who he was,
No. No,
but
poor
no, so
Ringo.
I must have just muddled on through and Zeppelin riffs and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I think we had a conversation before where you bought the Beatles book, and of course it was an approximation of the chords. It wasn't actually the real
oh
chords.
God,
So
yeah, the
you
Beatles
think
can
I can
complete.
play the Beatles, and then when you actually
Yeah,
listen, you think, no, I can't play the Beatles.
yeah.
But I mean, that was one of their geniuses is with the chords. So I just wonder, I mean, I'm sure there's some people interested. Is there a sort of specific style with the Beatles? And maybe you could show us a little bit on the guitar about chord sequences or something that, like a little trick that Lennon and McCartney used to use a lot, or was it like
Well,
different?
I mean, that's the thing with them. There were three players. There's John, Paul, and George. It's mind blowing. They go from like Blackbird and all this sort of,
Yeah,
You got Lennon with his Julia's, all this to amazing riffs, Oh yeah.
brilliant.
So this it's the breadth of Beatles stuff. I don't know how many songs they wrote in the 7 years they were famous or brought up, but there's like 200 odd or something stupid, and they're
Mm.
mostly pretty damn good and pretty creative. But it's the range of different styles and the musical growth. It's like mind blowing, isn't it?
When you think of the time that they were together, because it was like a short period, really, from the time when they met. Yeah, so I think yeah, the period of time that they really changed popular music, really, in that period of time.
Sure,
It wasn't long.
changed everything.
Yeah,
Changed everything.
and also,
Fashion.
yeah, the absolutely you're saying that about the breadth of the music, to go from Please Please Me up to, stuff they were doing on the White Album was incredible. So
Yeah,
specifically, I wanted to mention the Capitol gig, and I mean, I was too young to be there, and I know that you were
I
too young
was.
to be there,
Yeah.
but it seems to be a bit of a benchmark, I think, because I don't think they really played. I think they did an award ceremony after that, and they might have had some commitments in America, but I think certainly in the UK it was probably their last live gig.
Yeah. No, it's late. Oh, it's Christmas '65. Was it? Oh, this
Six,
December
65. It was yeah,
Yeah.
12th of December 65, and
Yeah.
it was of course sold out as well.
Yeah. I know people who actually went.
Hmm.
Um, uh, yeah, we've spoken about this, but they went twice. They went in '64 and '65, and the second time they said you just could not hear a note. It was just
No.
screaming.
Yeah.
All they can, I mean, a friend of mine, all he can remember is none of the set, but Lennon having that red Farfisa keyboard.
Hmm.
So it must have been doing I'm down or something. So it was
Yeah.
just the stage was a bit different to the sort of previous tour, but mind
Yeah.
blowing, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, before we move on to another great band, Led Zeppelin, I mean, is there a favorite sort of Beatles thing that you like to play on the guitar? There's something that is on
Oh,
your go-to thing? I mean, you've probably got hundreds. It's one of those questions it's difficult to answer, but is there something that you pick the guitar up and you think, I love playing that?
it depends what mood you're in, Tone, isn't it? Here
Yeah.
Comes the Sun's pretty cool. That's like a
Yeah.
sort of one of these, isn't it? Because as you know, I teach, and it's
Yeah.
well, that's a perfect thing. Say if you this is a typical Beatles thing, right? Say you're playing Norwegian Wood, which is all around a sort of D shape there. that's one thing you can do with a D. All right. So George Harrison obviously wrote, but what's amazing about that is the use of these things, right? If you
Yeah.
put a capo on, obviously, he did it to suit his voice and to give it a certain sound, but it's a different, you know. That, I mean, it's just mind blowing, isn't it? Just,
Brilliant. Yeah. I mean, it sounds so different, doesn't it, when you use a
yeah,
capo?
yeah.
Absolutely.
I used to think it was a cheat. You know, I thought, oh, well, they're using that, they can't play sort of bar chords, but it's nothing to do with that.
Well, I
It's
think
to
we
do
all
with all the fiddly bits you can do, isn't
I
it?
think we all thought that, yeah, until we
Yeah.
actually started using
What
one.
a
But I
cop
mean,
out. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
they're so popular now.
Yeah.
So I mean, the great band, the Beatles, and like we said about this gig on the 12th in the Capitol. I mean, it's crazy, but exactly the same date, but it was 1972. Led Zeppelin played there. So I know
Yeah.
that because we've spoken before, I know you were actually at the gig at the
I
Capitol.
was. I
Yeah.
was two. No, I was a bit
So,
older than that. But I remember
you wish.
yeah, I wish, yeah. No, it was I remember people had to queue up overnight to get tickets because they were that popular. And
Wow.
luckily I didn't. Somebody did it for me. And anyway, but like, I think the price, that's a thing, was about 32 shillings
I
because
think I
in
think it was
fact,
a
I might be
quid.
wrong. Was
I
it a
don't
quid?
know. I've just literally just before we spoke, I was looking at the poster and it says
Well, there you go.
all tickets £1.
Well, there
So
you go. Because the
uh,
reason I said 32 shillings, somebody swapped me
yeah,
uh, we had another ticket and they swapped a record, an LP for it. And they were 32 and 6. I remember that.
there
So I
you
thought it
go.
was about the same money. So, and they're gutted to this day that they didn't, they threw the record away years ago, but they didn't go and
Well,
see Zeppelin.
what was the record? Can you remember?
I think it was Wishbone Ash,
Oh well,
which
Led
is a
Zeppelin
biggie in those days.
concert or Wishbone Ash
Yeah,
album. Hmm.
I know. But you get
Oh,
to keep the album in those days, so I
I
don't know.
suppose so. Yeah, I
Yeah,
suppose. But I
but
mean,
yeah,
it must have been an amazing experience.
mind blowing. Yeah, I remember the excitement. I was about, I don't know, 14 or something. It's like, just the fact you were in the same room as them, you know. So
Hmm.
it's the classic thing. In those days, they used to have like all the lights down, all you can see is amplifier lights, and you see people scurrying about behind the amps, you know,
Hmm.
and they cut them whatever music is on. And Bonham went into the opening of Black Dog, but it's still dark. And when the band came in with the white lights on them, it's like, oh my God, I'm in a room with Jimmy Page. I couldn't believe it. It's like, you know, forget the rest of us. Jimmy Page is like a minor god to me. And the excitement and the energy coming off that stage, like, oh my, it's just seeing these people you've been listening to for, you know, since Zeppelin 1, 2, 3, and 4. I saw them in between. In fact, I'll tell you what that was. It was between Houses of the Holy and Led Zeppelin 4. So
Hmm.
they were doing stuff off Houses of the Holy, but it hadn't come out yet. So nobody knew these Rain songs. And
Hmm.
so what the hell is all this slow crap? You know, you want all the energy stuff. It was all that, you know. But it's like a 2.5 hour gig. It was just mind blowing. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean that must have been really inspiring in terms of playing guitar as well.
Yeah,
I
yeah. I
mean,
mean,
perhaps you can sort of show us some like the Jimmy Page sort of riffs that hooked you initially because he was very sort of riff centric, wasn't he? I mean, he's a great guitarist
oh
in lots of ways,
yeah,
and we
God,
all know
yeah.
about the background with him with the Yardbirds and session stuff that he did. He's a renowned guitarist, but I think Led Zeppelin really wrote the book on riffs, really.
Oh my God, yeah. I mean, you've got the well, where'd you start with them? It's like let's get a bit of distortion. You've got that one in you then. All that stuff.
Yeah.
But you've also got, obviously, you've got all your. It's just mind blowing, isn't it? You know.
It is.
I'll tell you something. Here's one I made up earlier, which we can touch on. Right. This is
Yeah.
how going on his session play and stuff and his range. I got this tuned into the key of Satan. Right.
Right. Yeah.
So this is you play obviously tone. This is C-A-C-G-C-E, right? And he
Right.
does this thing called Friends, which is on Led Zeppelin 3. So it
Yeah.
goes. So the riff is. it's just, that's just off the map, isn't it?
Incredible, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah,
How would you come up with that?
yeah. Well,
Where'd you start?
he's been worshipping Aleister Crowley for 5 minutes. Oh, no, I don't know how it's going. There's something strange going on. It's so because everyone thinks of him as this like obviously heavy blues rocker, but there's so many different styles he can
Yeah.
do. It's like
Yeah.
folky. He drew on a lot of the English folk scene, didn't he? Davy Graham and all that stuff. Different tunings. Dad Gaddy made very famous long
Yeah.
after loads of other people had. But yeah,
Mm.
he's just a constant. I mean, the first 5 albums or something, he's on fire, wasn't he? It's just all that stuff. It just still blows my mind. I remember funny about the Beatles. I remember when the Beatles split up. I didn't really care because a consummate fan as I was as a kid, and like Pepper and all that. By the time they were going wrong, when Let It Be came out, and all the I was more into this band called Led Zeppelin with all their virtuosity and the
Yeah.
flash and all. So like an 11, 12-year-old kid, I must have been when the Beatles split.
Mm.
That was the sort of way, and they were huge, they were absolutely massive. So it's only a couple of years later when I got over my rock thing a bit, got back into the songs again. I mean, ever since I'm like a knocked out Beatles.
It's an interesting progression, though, isn't it? Because
Yeah.
I'm sure that like you said there is quite true about the Beatles. But then if there hadn't been a Beatles, there wouldn't have been a Zeppelin, would there? Because
There wouldn't have
obviously
been a
they
loads of people.
and
Yeah.
lots of other things. So it's that
Yeah.
progression, and they kind of took it then. I mean, the '70s is a great decade anyway. There's some fantastic bands, but they kind of
Mind
took it
blowing.
then. But
Yeah.
they were probably the first that did that type of material. I mean, Cream was another band where you could nominate as having a style like that as well. But again, he's another guitarist, Page, who had played with other people, kind of like the Hendrix thing. Hendrix had been working with
Yeah.
a lot of soul bands and stuff, and kind of plied his trade and learned all these jazzy, funky chords. And then he's playing rock and he's chucking this other stuff in as well. So I guess Page
Psychedelic. Yeah. Yeah.
must have used that encyclopedia of knowledge to do things like that. Would
Yeah.
you would you say there's a specific thing that really makes Jimmy Page sound like Jimmy Page? Is there a special effect or an amplifier or something like that? Would define his sound?
I think he definitely is. His lead playing, he seems to favour quite a trebly
Mm.
rock tone because he gives you a lot of expression and bite. And if you listen back to a lot of their stuff compared to modern bands, they're not as distorty as you think it's going to be either. So
No,
he's
no.
just riding amps really hard, and he's got a lot of dynamics in his playing. And what I love about him is this. He's almost walking a tightrope of creativity, and he can fall off that tightrope at any time. And sometimes you hear him stumble a bit, but he just gives it this amazing edge, which if he was playing very, very safe, it wouldn't really work. He's not afraid to experiment. And I just love the fire in his playing and all that bite too, it's mind blowing to me. And you get these crazy things like on Since I've Been Loving You, just really jazzy. I love all that sort of stuff.
I mean, that bend is
Beautiful.
just genius, isn't it?
Yeah,
To put that bend in there.
Not that I'm biased. Yeah, minor deities, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, it's we're trying to keep it fairly short today because I know we've got busy lives with we're grandparents and we've got other stuff going on.
Dogs to
But
walk.
yeah, but I mean it's been fantastic catching up with you and talking to you, and I'm sure we can do another one of these in the
Oh,
future.
for
I mean,
sure.
one thing that I really wanted to mention is that you do tuition, and we're going to put up your details if anybody wants to get in touch with you.
Amazing.
I mean, if they're Led Zeppelin fans and Beatles fans, there's nobody better to go to really than Pete. But he'll teach you anything anyway. He's that sort of guy. But I mean, you've seen a little bit today, and if that's what you like, then we're always trying to help people, musicians and tutors in particular. But it's been a real pleasure talking to you. And somebody who was actually at the Led Zeppelin. We didn't quite get the Beatles one, but you were at the Led
No,
Zeppelin gig.
I'm a
So
friend of a friend.
yeah, you're a friend of a friend. Yeah,
6
but
stages of separation. Yeah.
yeah, but we'll catch up again, and we'll have another little feature on somebody else, I suppose, in the future. But it's been really cool talking to you today, and thanks for
Oh, you're
sparing
a
the
star.
time, Pete. Thanks
Oh,
very much.
you're a prince amongst gentlemen. I'll see you soon.
Cheers
Bravo.
now. Cheers.
Cheers. Ta-ra.